Good morning and welcome to the second week of our DigiFest 2020 from Scottish Government, Digital Health and Care. I'm Morag Hearty and I'm the Remote Health Pathway Lead at the Tech Programme at Scottish Government. A very warm welcome to you all. This is our second week and this is Monday, day 5. Just to let you know, there are still a few places left if any of your colleagues would wish to engage and take this real opportunity to hear speakers from across the world. We've had a really interesting and diverse few days last week, and I think you would find it very interesting. Some of the key emerging themes has really been about making sure that people come first, then the process and then technology really to support all of that. And today's programme is very packed. We have the theme for today, which is renewing and transforming beyond policy. Background to this theme was really about how we moved forward beyond the strategies and policies to develop and fully implement technology-enabled solutions, which really do actually transform service delivery. We're also aiming to gather information over this festival to refresh and to gather information that's actually relevant to the refresh of our digital health and care strategy. And this has been really, really helpful. We've had an absolute packed programme today. And remember, if you're not able to join live, then you can access the content on demand. You can access the Implementation Essentials session. This is later this morning. It's an in-conversation session led by our own Professor George Cooks, the Chief Executive Officer of the Digital Health and Care Innovation Centre. He's brought together a very interesting group of speakers, as I've said, from across the world: Scotland, Saudi Arabia, the United States, Estonia and England, giving very practical reflections on implementation. So I know Professor George Cooks is a really very exciting and interesting and amusing speaker. I'm sure he'll have brought together a very interesting session. I would well recommend that one. Along with my own colleagues, Scott Henderson and Helen Alexander, we'll be participating in a session later talking about remote health pathways, the innovation pipeline and the strategic procurement, which is including the impact, like many of us, of the pandemic on our work and how we've overcome that and used that as an enabler. We're also pleased to have the expertise from Scotland and Wales sharing the very important topic of reimagining telecare, discussing how we can move to a more preventative model instead of reactive, and supporting people has been such a crucial aspect of service delivery, especially this year, even more so, as I think we all would understand. The programme also includes a couple of sessions which focus on evaluation, and a very interesting session which will bring us up to date with our 4 Pathfinder areas and how they've been approaching transformation using the Scottish approach to service design. This is essential viewing if you're interested in service design and particularly working in partnership with citizens and the public and other key stakeholders. They have been doing a lot of work across those forums. The final session of today is an evening session, and it's focusing on digital mental health in Scotland, which has had an enormous expansion, particularly in this year, and change, and is very, very relevant to all of the challenges we've been actually facing across the world in this last 9 months. It's a topic with absolute relevance and resonance with every delegate in every region, I'm quite sure. Just to let you know as well, we have posters. There's virtual posters and there's a poster wall, that's in the expo area, but there's also poster sessions been scheduled in. Today there's one at 12:30 GMT, where the posters will be presented with a live Q&A with the authors, and you can find all of these on the programme. The expo is an area, very interactive. You can see the booths for different organisations and interact with the host there. So you can actually have live chat and meet people. It's not quite the same as having a cup of coffee with them, but certainly you can have that chat. And also in the expo area is the resource library, which contains the on-demand videos of the previous day's sessions in case you missed them, and any other information that's coming on aboard there. I'm honoured today. We have a very experienced speaker today in Jacqueline de Rojas. I'm absolutely delighted and honoured to introduce her. It's a subject that I'm quite sure has been coming up in the last few days, but certainly is vital to our work going forward, and that's about bringing and driving diversity and inclusion in digital health and care. Jacqueline de Rojas is the president of techUK. It's a trade association which collaborates with and brings together people, the companies, government and other stakeholder organisations to focus on delivering the positive outcomes that digital technology can achieve. Jacqueline is universally respected as an advocate for diversity and inclusion in all its forms and ensuring all voices are heard and involved in designing and developing technologies. Jacqueline once said that she wasn't particularly comfortable accepting personal accolades. However, these have included the 2017 Catherine Variety Award for Science and Technology. 2018 brought the Women in Tech Award for Advocate of the Year, acknowledging her contribution to diversity, and a well-deserved CBE for services to international trade in technology in the Queen's New Honours list. In 2019, she was awarded the Digital Technology Award at the Asian Women of Achievement Awards. So I'm absolutely delighted to introduce Jacqueline de Rojas for her keynote speech on the diversity and driving diversity and inclusion in digital health and care. I'm sure you'll find it really, really interesting and inspiring. Thank you very much, Jacqueline.
Hello, my name is Jacqueline de Rojas, President of techUK. Thank you for inviting me to participate in this year's DigiFest. It is an honour to be here virtually and to share techUK's perspective on digital health and care as part of today's renewing and transforming theme. We know that technology can transform healthcare for the better. And we have seen throughout this unfortunate pandemic just how important that is. Health matters to all of us, regardless of age, location, background, or ethnicity. And we are fortunate to have a world-leading health and care system, and we benefit from a growing number of innovators that aim to improve patient outcomes, access to services, and to support staff and citizens through the use of the latest technology. But we have seen that inequalities are writ large. If we take COVID-19, current evidence shows that those, for example, from a BAME background have been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. 2020 has been a wake-up call for many of us about our need to be more proactive in tackling the inequalities and injustices inflicted on our friends and colleagues and our families, particularly those from ethnic minority backgrounds. And as we watch the world demand a level playing field for all, it is, to my mind, no longer enough to be non-racist. This is not a time to be neutral or to sit on the fence. This massive shift in attitude has created positive momentum for organisations to have frank and sometimes uncomfortable conversations about inequality and about race. It has accelerated corporate ambitions for meaningful change, not least within our own membership at techUK. And as president of this organisation, I have made it my priority to champion the benefits of inclusive workplaces and to encourage diversity and inclusion in tech. It's funny, when I first started, the tech sector was so male-dominated that in 1999, at the start of my leadership career, I was passed over for a promotion and I was told, Jacqueline, we simply don't put women on the leadership team. Very, very disappointing words to hear, and I hope no one would say that to me or to anyone else today. But the unconscious bias is still here, and it isn't abating quickly. The stats speak for themselves. Although we women represent nearly 50% of the UK workforce, women actually only make up 17% of the UK's tech workforce, and only 15% of the entire tech workforce comes from an ethnic background. And this has got to change, not just for women, actually. We have to embrace diversity in all its forms, gender, of course, but introverts, extroverts, those on the neurodiversity scale with Asperger and autism, they have superpowers when it comes to spotting fraudulent patterns and irregularities. We need to think about ethnicity, regional differences, age, and so much more. So how can we renew our commitment and focus on increasing diversity and inclusion in health tech? Let me give an example. I heard a disappointing story of a doctor that couldn't access the locker room at the gym because the swipe card wouldn't work. Trying to identify the issue, the team responsible changed the swipe card out, called the techies in. Turns out that the job title doctor had been hard-coded as a male job title, and that's why she couldn't get into the locker room. Now, this is a small example of bias, but it just goes to show that unless you have women on the design team or people with neurodiversity, ethnicity, regionality, age, we will create a world that doesn't work for everyone. And if our lives are more dependent on technology than ever before, the health sector itself is increasingly dependent on tech for its ability to serve citizens at scale in the future. This because of austerity and productivity reasons which require automation, but also to keep up with the pace of change and the demands on the healthcare system. It's going to have to use tech in order to perform. As you might imagine, I am a technology optimist, and one of the things I most welcome is the democratization of health through technology. And that means, for example, that some of the world's most deprived people can have access to the same level of health information via a smartphone as the richest ones can get through the world's top medical experts. So to my mind, tech can be a much needed equalizer. But in order to do that, digital inclusion has to be an issue that we keep at the forefront of our minds. I know that in Scotland alone, 800,000 people are said to be facing digital inequality, and I therefore welcome the Scottish Government's Connecting Scotland programme that I heard about recently, and that aims to address this very issue. The focus, as the team leading this work has emphasised, is not only to provide access to devices, but also to ensure that people who have the devices know how to use them to access healthcare and other services. So we should ask ourselves then, what does transformation with diversity and inclusion at the core look like? I've mentioned before that tech is a powerful tool that can help improve patient outcomes and alleviate problems within our current healthcare system. However, there is a lack of diversity amongst technology innovators and a certain shortage of technologies to meet the needs of our growing and diverse population. So without diverse and inclusive teams, unconscious bias will be built into tech, ultimately putting patients at risk. So we need to think about transformational change. And transformational change, in my opinion, has been the work of the Shuri network, which techUK has proudly been working with for the last few months, as well as One Health Tech and many others. But launched last year, the Shuri network aims to tackle biases by providing Black and minority ethnic women in digital health roles with a platform to propel their careers into leadership positions where they are grossly underrepresented. It's clear to me that if we are to thrive in a digital future which includes everybody, we must ensure that all our voices are heard when it comes to designing, building, and testing technology solutions. Otherwise, we risk creating a world that continues to perpetuate biases and simply doesn't work for everybody. In the words of my favourite artificial intelligence guru, Dame Wendy Hall, she says, if it's not diverse, it is simply not ethical. And if you're thinking that diversity is not your area of expertise or not your problem to solve, think about this. Perhaps the greatest threat to diversity and inclusion is the belief that someone else will fix it. So every tiny shift you make in your own inclusive behavior and tolerance when faced with someone who works differently, eats differently, looks differently, comes from a different culture, all of your changes, inclusive changes, lead to exponentially better outcomes for an inclusive culture. And I often say this, but if you only take away one thing from all the things that I've said, let it be this. Diversity matters. It matters because if we want to improve healthcare, it is important to have industry leaders, designers, and creators be representative of all the perspectives, nuances, cultures, trends, and needs of the communities that they'd serve. I'd like to challenge you to think harder about how we can each be diverse and more inclusive in our own lives, our health sector, and the wider ecosystem. We know that bringing together the latest technologies can empower our hardworking doctors, nurses, and medical teams to provide high standards of care at scale. And with the current challenge that we're facing, this is only going to become more important. Finally, then, let's not forget that tech is just the enabler. The responsibility is on each and every one of us to ensure that we deploy it in diverse and inclusive ways that ultimately underpin the digital future of our health and care system and of our society. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacqueline. That was really inspirational. I really appreciated that. I particularly like your expression of diversity being an equaliser. It's not just about enabling, it's actually about equalising access. And I certainly have been given a lot of food for thought and additional considerations when involved as I am in developing services in that diverse and inclusive way. Can I just remind any participants listening in, please do add questions into the plenary chat box and we'll pick them up there and ask Jacqueline. I'm sure you've got lots of questions. Don't be shy, please do ask them. You know, some real thoughts there. You mentioned we should all be thinking and considering diversity in technology, Jacqueline. Whose problem do you think this is actually to solve? Who should be taking the action here?
It's a really good question, isn't it? Because I get the sense that everyone's sort of waiting for the cavalry to arrive and to fix it. And I'm not convinced that a higher power, a central body, government, businesses are going to solve the problem. I'm not even sure if that's right. I think there is a cultural shift that needs to be made by everybody. And I believe that I'm not even sure that inclusion and diversity is something that you do. I think it's something that you are. And from there, I would say that it's everybody's problem to solve. So for all of us to be that little bit more inclusive, a little bit more tolerant when someone doesn't dress like you or eat like you or work in the same pattern as you do, or come from the same culture as you, you know, it's for us to just move 2 millimeters towards that person, that difference, and to be inclusive. And I think it's much more of a verb than it is a noun, if that makes sense. And I think it's for all of us to get involved with, for all of us to solve. If we all did that, I am sure it would disappear overnight, actually.
Thank you. And I think the recent media attention this issue has been raised, particularly in the last few weeks, must have a very positive perspective on this. And I think it's really good to hear what else we can do. Can I ask, you know, what about the industry? You know, are they taking this seriously, the tech industry, or what else could they be doing to help?
I think the answer is that, well, there's two answers, and I oscillate between the two. Everybody I talk to, so we have 900 companies that are members of techUK, you know, very large ones, very small ones, and all of them care about diversity, and all of them do great things to promote diversity, to hire diverse people. However, the needle isn't moving. We're still, less than 20% of women in tech. And I wonder if we also have to change our language in terms of how we talk about technology. I feel we wall ourselves up behind 3-letter acronyms, and we talk a bit geeky, in sort of geeky language. And I think we may have to start talking about engineers as problem solvers, for example. That would be much more encouraging for us women to want to join the industry, actually, because we are the world's problem solvers as much as anything else. I don't know about anyone listening out there, but I'm solving, wearing different hats every day, mum, nurse, dustbin man, all of those. I'm that every day. So I think we have to think about how we talk about tech as well, so that we encourage that. I suppose that diverse community to say, yeah, I can do that. And that's why I mentioned neurodiversity, because the superpowers that, someone with autism and Asperger's have, when they can, in the cyber world, for example, they can just see things that us mere mortals can't see. And I just wish we could open the floodgates and help get those kinds of superpowers into tech as well.
That's great. There's a question here, as a leader, what steps can you suggest I take to promote diversity in the workplace?
I think one of the things that, as a leader, it's so great to have someone who even asks that question at the top, because, and actually we are all leaders. It doesn't have to be right at the top. It can be, anywhere in the organization. But the fact that you're actually asking that question, number one, warms my soul on a Monday morning. But also, I think it's things like, just talking, creating a forum for people to talk about difference. But also, we often talk about this thing called unconscious bias. And actually, I'm wondering if we should think more about the ability to see through our own privilege. So I've got this amazing graphic, which I will share, which is called the Wheel of Power / Privilege. And it goes right from citizenship to skin color to ability to mental health to body size to wealth to language. And in the middle, you've got, under citizenship, you've got citizen. That's privilege. You've got skin color. That's white. You've got formal education, post-secondary. That's privilege. You've got sexuality, heterosexual, privilege. You've got body size, slim. That's privilege. And if you are those things, you can't see other people's problems. So, for us women, for example, because we are not male, it makes a difference to how people see us and also how we act. And I think we have to start thinking about what it's like to walk a mile in someone else's shoes. Because once you do that, you see what they see. And I think that's part of being a leader, is walk a mile in someone else's shoes, ask your people to do that, and then come back and have a discussion about what it's like to be Black, what it's like to be half Chinese, what it's like to be not quite as slim as all the models in the shop windows. It changes life. And also then what it's like to try and get a job if you're that person versus, the person that you are. And I think that's what I would say. Check your privilege and look through the lens of someone who's not like you.
So that lends it quite nicely to another question we have that says, do you have suggestions for how people at the bottom of the hierarchy in digital health design and research settings can push this cultural shift, especially if there's less of a recognition of its importance at higher levels? So
oh my gosh,
nicely with that.
Firstly, it's a brilliant question, because it is a life much lived in that question, and I totally appreciate and understand it. One of the things that I did when I wasn't at the top was ask the question, hold on, where are the others? Because if everybody in the room, everybody in your meetings, your design meetings, look like you and are all thinking like you, they might even actually look different, but they might all be in a group think scenario. It is it's so useful to have someone who's thinking laterally and saying, well, hold on, what about, when the seatbelt was invented, women and children died because they were all created by men of a certain weight and height. And you think, well, what about the little people, and what about the women? You know, so it's just asking that question, where are the others, in whatever form it works, I think will give you a lot of curiosity-led leadership, even if you're not at the top of the pile, but you're involved in the scrum at the bottom. And I think that really helped me. And the other thing about asking questions like that is it doesn't tend to leave dead bodies around you. And I mean that metaphorically, of course, because, you know, being combative in a group that's not very diverse can be life-threatening, as I have found out. So I do recommend that we are curiosity-led in a way that serves everybody versus doesn't serve everybody.
Thank you. And another question coming in. You quoted that it's not diverse. If it's not diverse, then it's not ethical. So what would be the main diverse areas you would look at when making any ethical assessment, for example, in a new project?
Yeah, again, another great question. Well, firstly, I would ask the user question, who is this for? And if it's for all of us, so the older people, younger people, people who don't have technology skills, for example, how do we create accessibility for everybody? Is there a regional difference? And you know, I think all those diverse questions during the design phase really matter, so that we can create the outcome that works for everyone. And actually, if you have diverse people on your teams, you will find that those questions tend to get asked more than not. You know, I think it's, if you look at if you take a snapshot of your design team, Penny, who asked that question, then you will see very quickly whether you've got some diversity in there or not.
Thank you very much. Has anyone else got any questions? There's still time to pop something into the chat box.
So great that everyone's so busy on a Monday morning. I love it.
Yes, I think it's really good. And I'm sure people will be listening in later on or across the world whenever you're waking up, wherever you are. Feel a little bit about something like that. So another question here, if we keep asking the right questions about missing others, but we encounter deep-rooted thinking, how best can we challenge that? I think we've probably all come across that, really, and I'm sure you have in your lifetime, Jacqueline. I know you have.
Yeah, and Helen, thanks for that question. This is the point around privilege. This is the point around people not being able to see beyond what they know themselves. So one of the ways we do that is by making sure we educate people to see beyond what they don't know. So if you are white and privileged and citizen and thin and come from a reasonably wealthy, grounded, happy family environment, then you won't be able to see the problems of someone who doesn't come from that environment. And I think that's where we just have to change the perspective. Look outwards, not inwards, would be my mantra in that view. And I think anybody who is on the team would be grateful for that level of education, depending on how you present it, Helen. I would say it's a dance.
Okay, and another question, when you meet resistance, do you come back later or walk away to try and find another group who will support you? What's your experience there?
It's so funny. I took a group of customers to the British Grand Prix many years ago, and one of my team said to one of the customers, "Would you like to meet the managing director?" And he said, "Oh, I'd love to meet him. Can't wait." And the reason, by the way, I took them to the Grand Prix, I took them in a helicopter because we were missing the traffic. It was a treat for everyone. It was in the days when hospitality was a thing. Anyway, on this Chinook helicopter, he turned around and he said, "Oh my God, you're a woman." And, I was at a fork in the road at that point because I could have got really cross with him. But actually, I used some humor and I said, "Oh my God, I didn't realize I needed a penis to make a decision, but let's discuss it over lunch." And do you know what? We had a great lunch. We formed a relationship and friendship which held for over 20 years. He probably bought more software from me than he ever intended to, and I'm fine with that, probably out of guilt. My point here is that when I meet resistance, I don't always meet resistance with resistance. I sometimes deploy humor. It serves me well to do that. And then, you know, I use a little bit of influence to get what I want. I certainly got what I wanted in that scenario. And it always makes me smile when I think of him. He's still a friend, but it worked.
That sounds like a very female response, actually.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. Also asking, you know, are there examples from other countries? I know you've had that international engagement. Examples from other countries who have a clear policy on diversity?
Yeah, I think we can see that writ large probably in Finland. To be fair, it does tend to be the smaller countries who are able to do this. Finland had targets. They've got the youngest female prime minister ever, and you know, largest group of female politicians. You have to look at New Zealand as well as a great example of that, and what is going on with their Maori population is just astonishing. So, but it does tend to be the smaller countries, and we do have to think about that, because you know, it's harder to solve for the larger countries, and it's more complex. So it's not a black and white issue, but again, I would say it's for all of us to solve.
Yeah, well, maybe in Scotland we'll come into that, and we've certainly had good international engagement with Finland and New Zealand. Actually, we've had engagement there, so learning from them, so that's really good. How best to encourage and promote inter-organisational diversity, which is a really good point, as an engagement and learning tool to extend thinking and practice.
Yeah, I love this one, because we do tend to sort of operate in silos, don't we? And I would say keep your values and your maxims quite simple. This is my look outwards, not inwards piece, because great ideas are no respecter of hierarchy. And if you do anything as a leader, you know, think about what we need under pandemic situations to thrive. It's the ability to be adaptable. And the leadership question of the day is, where do you get your best ideas from? Because if it's from your inner circle, I can tell you, you'll be narrowing your options, not widening them. And so I would say, look outwards, not inwards, and check where you get your great ideas from, because it definitely isn't going to be from within. It's going to be from without.
Yeah, and I think that's probably an answer to the other question of how do you suggest we keep diversity alive and on the agenda, you know, to actually live it.
Yeah, and Ian, thanks for that question. And this goes back to the point about, you know, diversity and inclusion is best served as a verb, not a noun, and it's best served as a verb that we all are versus something that we do. So be inclusive and be diverse yourself, and educate where you can, because if you just stick it on the agenda as, right, we're going to do diversity and inclusion today, it becomes a moment in time. It becomes a pinprick of ecstasy, but it does not become a way of life. And it doesn't become something that we are. And if we're going to put it in our DNA, then I think we really have to verbalize it, live it, and be it.
Thank you so very much. And I see that the last question here is really probably aimed at the team here. Hopefully we can also start to see more diversity presenting at conferences like this. And I think, you know, Nessa will be sort of busily taking notes, I know, and Margaret's on the call. I think, you know, there's no doubt whatsoever, because this theme has been coming across in the last few days, and I'm sure will continue. And I think, you know, having a conference like this digitally is a real move forward, and we're certainly engaging with many more people than would ever have been possible, you know, on a live event. Being able to let people get in when and where they can is a help, certainly. Although we must be obviously aware that some people will be excluded. So how do we get over that? I don't know if Margaret or Nessa, you would like to come in on this one.
Morag, it's Margaret. Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, I really like the point you make, Jacqueline, about it's not something you do, it's something you are. And, you know, I think it's how we all integrate diversity in the way we work, rather than, as you say, a class to attend. And yes, I think in relation to how we run these events and how we get contributors, you know, absolutely, we need to look at that diversity. I'm also aware that we have Discover Digital, which is led by the Health and Care Alliance. We're going to do this for the third time. And, you know, that is an attempt, I think, to get that wider engagement, you know, from across a much more diverse sort of audience and participants than maybe we would do with conferences like this. But no, I think a couple of very key messages for us and the work we're doing in digital health and care.
And I think also, you know, we're all learning how to live virtually. And so, you know, things like subtitles, I have discovered something really useful about subtitles, not only for, you know, clearly people who are hard of hearing, but also, you know, I think there is a stat which says your little ones will learn to read something like 18 months, can't be that long, 18 months earlier if the subtitles are turned on the screens that they're watching. So just saying, turn on the subtitles anyway for the little ones, but also it makes accessibility much wider for a conference like this as well. So just something that I've picked up as we learn to live and work online as well.
That's really useful. Thank you very much indeed. So I don't see any other questions coming in. So I think at that one, it just leaves me to say an absolute huge thank you for your time, which I know is very precious, like everyone's at the moment, but certainly we really appreciate it. I think it's brought a real sense of something new and different to think about. It's certainly thinking with the themes that we've been seeing in the last few days. I'm sure we'll continue through this conference. So I just thank you very, very much indeed for your time and your inspirational thoughts all about this. And I think there's some really positive messages coming through, and I'm sure we'll continue to do so. So thank you very much again. And for everyone else, please do use your registration, listen into the other events, and apply diversity in your workplace, wherever that may be. So thank you very much again. Bye now.